Okay. Oh, it's loud. It's loud. For once, last episode, your voice was louder than mine. Yeah, now you're going to have that mic way closer to that mouth hole of yours.
Turn your thing up.
Well, no, I just don't want to be louder than you again. My voice is very dominating. Okay. Have you got the list of other things we're talking about?
I do. Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll start with our questions. I'm going to start with a story first of all, because I think it's going to be entertaining for the people, you know?
I'm going to turn you down in my ears a little bit.
You don't like the sweet, sweet sound of my voice in your ears?
I love it at a certain volume.
Okay, now we are recording on GarageBand, so I can upload this goodness for Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all that stuff. Okay, so Greg and I, MDM and I, went to a really nice Airbnb in the weekend, but we had issues with booking it. Because let me tell you a little story. MDM and I went away this time last year, actually, because MDM's birthday is in November, beginning of November. So for his birthday last year, I booked an Airbnb in Red Hill, and it was a really, really cute spot, really like just gorgeous, like nice place. And it was basically a weekend of fucking. And we got in trouble because, first of all, I was on my period. And things just got a little bit messy, as they do. I couldn't really help it. It was just one of those things. So I had to pay to have their comforter replaced. Not their comforter, the like mattress protector replaced, which I tried to clean. And there wasn't, okay, to be fair, there wasn't actually that much of a mess. It was like a tiny little spot that just like, I was like, look, it's not that much. But I had to replace the whole thing. And then we got a very unhappy, judgmental email because we'd taken a toy that we'd never used down with us. We left it behind. And the toy was a paddle. And on the paddle, in big capital letters, was the word slut. So these poor people hosting us would have found just like a bed covered in period blood. Just this paddle.
It wasn't covered.
It wasn't. That was just for dramatic effect. But the place that we tried to book for his birthday just Ben was owned by the same people.
And you're blacklisted by them.
Blacklisted. So Greg had to book them so that we could sneak in. And I'm pretty sure the whole time we were there, I was like, which toy should we leave behind this time, babe?
Just wanted to leave like a little calling card
just
for
like
them,
something.
or like send them a photo of both of us.
I wanted to also, we actually just wanted to blackmail them into giving us our old paddle back. Like take something of theirs and be like, I will return this when you return my motherfucking slap paddle.
I hope they kept it. I hope they've made good use of it. They didn't just throw it in the bin or burn it. I hope they kept it.
My mic keeps turning on and off.
And it's really spiced up their section.
Well, I reckon that the guy who owns it, like the guy that's on the listing, I reckon he was down, but the email was from the wife that was like pretty disappointed that we found this. And I was like, oh, God, okay. And he was like, babe, no, it's cool. Don't you? Like, isn't this kind of interesting? And she's like, absolutely not. Disgusting. And she would have been all pissed off and he would have been like, oh, fuck, my sex life is so shit. So, yeah, that was our experience. But the Airbnb weekend was absolutely amazing. It was exactly what I think we both needed. Getting away was really, really good. Just getting the fuck out of the house.
Yeah. Good little trip down the coast. And
like you can have days off work, right? But if you're in the house, you're like, oh, there's that job that's been staring at me for months. I should do that on my free time now that I have the free time that I need to do that. So being out somewhere else in someone else's house, clean, clutter-free, not being reminded of all the jobs that you have to do was really good.
That's perfect.
Yeah,
Thank
a nice
you.
birthday weekend.
Yeah.
So I got a message from someone who's been listening to our podcast, and she's actually someone that I went to uni with, which I find really cool. Way back in the day. And she sent through 2 questions. And I just love that like people that I know from like high school and uni are like, we know all about your life now and your relationship. And I'm going to ask you questions about it.
It's been really interesting. Like I've had a few of those people that like I haven't talked to for a long time or things like that have reached out. They're like, hey, like I really love it. You're talking about this, or this has been good. Like, yeah, it's cool, and cool to find people that it resonates with, and people you know as well.
Just people that come out of the woodworks. Like, I don't know if I've said it on here, but one of my best mates in the US, when I was public about being like, oh yeah, I'm in an open relationship, he was like, mate, me too. Did not say mate, absolutely did not use that word, but was like, yeah, me too. We've been open since day one. And he's like, I'm just a big old slut. And I was like, what the fuck? How did I not know this? So it's cool. Okay, so the message that we got. We've got a question about when I was talking I don't know which one this was. It was podcast 3, which was not a solo. There was the one that we did together. What was that one about? We did the rules of our relationship.
3, no, it was your solo one.
It wasn't my solo one. Okay, yeah.
I got stood up.
Oh, yeah, I was talking about dating. I'd just come off the back of I'd been stood up and I was like, fucking, this is this makes sense. That's why she sent this question now. So she says, you talk about how your dates have usually flopped in comparison with your chemistry / sex life / dating with Greg. Why date other people if Greg is superior to other experiences? And first of all, my immediate response was like, well, I'm not trying to have bad dates. Like, it's not the goal. The goal isn't to be like, oh, well, I'm just looking for some shit dates. It's just happened that way. Like, in dating is kind of like that. Like, you get the good with the bad. So that's part of it. I think that tends to be something that I probably have talked more about in terms of like my experiences. Like, it's easier to talk about the bad stuff and get like hung up on that and caught up in it. But there have been some good experiences as well. And then the other part of it is that there's no competition. Like, it's not like, well, the winner is the one that I spend my time with. It's like I spend a predominant amount of my time with Greg because I love spending my time with him. And then in my own time, I can use that time the way that I want. And it's important to me to be connecting with other people and talking to other people and exploring that to whatever degree that kind of, I guess, manifests. So it's like sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And every experience has allowed me to gain great insight into my feelings for Greg or my feelings about our relationships. So it's only benefited the relationship. So yeah, I don't think it's like well, why would I do it? It's like, no, there's actually really good benefits to it because I get to explore things that I enjoy exploring about myself. I get to meet other people and have that experience with other people. And yes, maybe it's not always amazing because people are assholes, but I can't help that people are assholes. And yeah, there's no real like hierarchy between people. Like, yes, I guess I'd consider you like my primary partner. I mean, that's not really even a term. I think, yeah, it's like we're not polyamorous, so it's not like I can be like, oh, you're my primary and this is my secondary. It's just like you're my partner. But yeah, I don't think there's like a. Yeah, I mean, it's a valid question, like why? But I still think like there's still. I enjoy making connections with other people and sometimes it's not necessarily like the dates and the chemistry and the sex life. Like I know that that's probably not going to compare to you just because like what we have is so great. And so that's not what I'm looking for either. Like I'm not looking for a second Greg. Like I just don't think that's possible. Like it actually would not exist. So I'm actually just looking for like, hey, something that is casual with someone that I like having a good chat to and having good sex with, like something like that, just like anybody would be looking with casual dating, I guess. So yeah, I'm not looking to replace that or to get more of that. It's just about knowing that, there's more pleasure and enjoyment and connections to be made. And you don't have to be limited in that.
I think there's so much to the process of that as well. Like, that question is asking about like, the event of the date being the focus and being the thing that's like, whether it goes good, bad, whether it was average, whether it was amazing, whatever, it's like there's so much before that point that, when you actually go on the date, there's the connection and discussions that we have around that. There's the fun and excitement of just chatting to someone new and flirting with someone new or whatever.
Talking to people online. Like that's a really fun thing to do.
As well as so there's that process of, like anyone knows that goes through like dating people, there's that thrill of like, oh, someone new, exciting, get it, like, whether it's getting dressed up or whatever it is to get ready to go on the date. There's so much of that stuff beforehand that sure, like it can be then a letdown if the date didn't meet your expectations or whatever, but there is still value around some of those other things. And, then post date, like us reconnecting and then us debriefing and talking about it, like I think that there's a lot of value in a lot of those other parts.
Yeah.
So, I think, like I've said before, and I've probably mentioned on the podcast, like I think to start with, well, I think that the benefits from it all have been much more. Like, I think we've gotten a lot closer through that process, and I think there's a lot more like internal benefits to us than it just being a self-serving, just for me thing. So I think, no matter what the outcome of the date is, you still get all those other things around it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that said, it's like, even if people weren't necessarily to go out on the dates, I think it's just fun to be able to be like, hey, I just get to talk to people online, like, and go on the dating apps and just like swipe people and have little floaty conversations. Like, I think that's kind of fun. And so that's kind of part of it. And then eventually it just leads to like, hey, let's catch up. But like there's, like you said, there's so much stuff around it that's still enjoyable. So yeah, I probably was emphasizing the bad a lot because I was like, fuck, it just got stood up. Oh
you were pretty unhappy at that point about that particular event.
Okay, so another question that I got. Oh, that's your laundry. I was like, what is that sound?
Ignore that.
I was like, is that your stomach? Okay. I just taken 5 so that Greg can sort this fucking washing machine out. Oh, you could actually leave it going if you wanted. Okay, the other question that we got is, I'm going to move that camera down a little bit. And she was like, no judgment, like just purely out of interest. In a consensual non-monogamous relationship, do you believe in marriage? And could you be married and continue non-monogamy? It's not that I don't believe in marriage. It's just that I've personally never felt any desire to get married. Like, marriage has never been something that I'm like, I really want to get married. That's super important to me. It's not something that holds a lot of value in my life, like in my brain, I guess, really. Like, I think it probably stems from my parents were not married when they had me. Like, they got married afterwards, but mum was like, I just wanted you kids to have your father's last name. And I'm like, did you have to get married with that? No. But I think it was more out of tradition's sake, perhaps, than anything else. Like, I don't think that they felt like they needed to. Like, she didn't do a big wedding. She wore an orange dress and a very 80s hat. Yeah, it was in this tiny little chapel that's actually in like a museum in New Zealand, in Auckland. So like you can go and visit it. It's at the MOTAT. So if anybody knows MOTAT, it's like the automobile museum that you can go to. So the little chapel there is where my parents got married, which is super random.
Well,
so I can like drive
super
by and
into
I'm like,
cars and stuff. Is that anything?
I don't know if it was to that degree though. That he was like, babe, we're getting married at the MOTAT. I just think they just wanted a cute little chapel, and that was like,
good.
I don't know. I actually would love to know what the decisions were like that went into that process. So yeah, they got married. It was a tiny wedding. Like, I've only seen a couple photos from it, really. I just see the orange dress all the time. So even that, it's like, it was never a significant part of my parents' relationship. So it's never felt like that important. And then it was my dad's second wedding as well. So my dad's had 3 weddings. And it's like, I guess part of that is like, it just sort of underwhelms the importance and significance of it a little bit to a degree. It kind of makes, I'm sort of like, it kind of undermines the power of, you must get married, and that's really meaningful in your relationship. I'm like,
yeah, and we've had a few discussions around all that, and I think you came in maybe with a much like harder stance, like against marriage, and like I've always been backwards and forwards. Is it important? Do I care? Do I want to? My parents divorced when I was 5, so like same, like I kind of came from a divorce marriage thing, like the same. My mum's second marriage, neither of them remarried. So I think it's like, I wasn't really sure, but I think one of the things I've said to you is like, you can kind of redefine, like, I think, if you take that, like what marriage is, also just learning from your parents and take that really traditional view of it. I think that if you can kind of redefine it to go, well, why do you want to do it? Why is it important?
that was the question. It was like, why should you get married?
Yeah. And like, I think I said to you early on, like my sister's wedding was a really cool experience. There was 25 people, were away for a week, and the 2 families, like we spent a bunch of time together over the course of a week, got to know each other really well, and it was kind of this really cool experience of like the blending of 2 families
connecting.
And kind of having these things where we're sitting down to dinner and getting to know them, and kind of that symbolism of 2 families coming together. And that was the big thing I took away from that. I'm like, okay, that was a really cool experience if that was what it was about. And yeah, we just had this like cool week, went out partying, ate dinner, whatever, and the wedding was at the end of the week on the Saturday, and we all left on the Sunday.
Mm.
And it was I came over that really small and intimate, like you talked to everyone, you got to spend time with everyone, and that was really cool, like from an actual like the event of the wedding point of view. But
Mm.
yeah, I think there is a degree of, I think, the symbolism of, and I think last time we talked about it, like that commitment to that spending the rest of your life together. The same as there's something to having the discussion where you're like, hey, I want to be with you,
Mm.
and I want to commit to that. So I still think there's, if I redefine what it is that's important about marriage, I can see some value in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said yesterday, which was like, or maybe even this morning, it was like, this is the first relationship that you've done on purpose.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the fear that I have around marriage. Like, one, I'm like, I don't know if it's that important. Two, I think that it almost makes people take their relationship for granted. Like, I think that it's like a really quick way for people to be like, oh, well, like, this is it. Like, I'm locked in and I don't need to stress out anymore. And it's like, that's a really shitty way to be in a relationship. Like, it should be deliberate. It should be intentional. It should be have purpose the whole time. And you should be doing things on purpose. So I think that's been part of my hesitancy around it. And then perhaps a little bit of like just commitment phobia, like just being like, I don't know, like if I want to get divorced, then what the fuck was the point? Like it's just going to be messy, which was my parents' divorce. It was really fucking messy and like horrendous and a very bad ending. So it's like,
you can apply that to a relationship, but
yeah, exactly.
you go, well, why get in a relationship if there's a chance that you might break up and then you have to go through a breakup? It's like,
yeah, no, I don't know if that's exactly the same. I think a marriage is more contractual.
Yeah, that's a word.
Yeah, it's more of a I just think that almost paperwork process of like defining and announcing the relationship to the public is actually different to just getting into a relationship with two people that commit to each other, like committing in front of people and in front of your friends and family, and like and being declared as a couple or like as married. Like I think that is a different thing. And yes, it can end, but you can argue that fucking everything can end, right? Like so that argument is like, well, you just apply that to everything.
But that's what I mean. Like if you take that defeatist view of like, oh well, everything could end, so I'm just not going to do anything, rather than go, I don't know.
So yeah, I think that kind of fueled my like perhaps fear or hesitancy or just like kind of like, well, what's the point? Like I think that was it. It was like, why would I do it? Like, well, I don't have a why really. And then the other thing for me is that something that I've been really proud of that I've done, and I don't know if I'm proud of it, but it just worked out this way. And I'm like, oh yeah, I think that's a thing that I did kind of deliberately. Like I never prioritized relationships in my life. And I remember seeing a lot of my friends being like, just looking for a man, like just looking to lock him down and get a ring on that finger and do the kids thing and just get on that relationship escalator. Like that was their mission in life. And I've seen people that were doing other things with their life and just dropped it all, and their world became about their husband and kids. And it's like, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. But if I've seen someone who had other interests and other things going on in their lives, and it seems like they've lost a part of their identity because they've made 100% of who they are that one thing, I'm like, hey, maybe there's an imbalance there that wasn't there previously, and now there is. It's like that stuff to me scares me because I don't want to lose that part of me. I don't want to lose my own identity and I can see myself doing that probably as well, being like, I'm just fucking all in on this, like getting married and having kids thing. Like,
I think that's so much of the same of getting a relationship, like because you said the exact same thing about getting a relationship. And I think there's some of like the non-monogamy piece where it's like, it allows you to keep that like, hey, like I want to go explore this to myself. And I think it is some of that preserving of realizing that your own needs are important to make sure you're part of a healthy couple. To go, hey, like this is something I need. And whether yes, in non-monogamy, the underlying piece of that, you practice that in sexually or like that. I think it is a good reminder throughout that of doing those things in other ways. You need to be like, hey, I actually just need a weekend for myself, and being able to voice what you want. Because I think a lot of people do get it, jump into relationships and not prioritize some of those things, not prioritize themselves and just do everything for the other person. But I think that's part of, if you take away the sexual component, non-monogamy, it's like, well, what is the underlying principle? It's like realizing that you have needs that may or may not be solely coming from the other person.
It's kind of just exercising your ability to have a life outside of your relationship,
Yeah,
like quite like to a greater degree than other people do,
Mm.
perhaps.
yeah, and I think it's like, well, I say to people, like, it's not up to me to like, I'm not here to put rules on what
Mm.
you can and can't do. You're your own person living your own life, and if you do, if you're into someone else or you meet someone you like, whatever, like, explore it, do what you want,
It's a
because
version of autonomy, right?
yeah, it's absolutely what I think the underlying piece about non-monogamy is. But I think that autonomy, radiates through other parts of your life,
Mm.
and it's like just a constant reminder of, hey, like, what do I need at the moment? And I think then to link back to the question of, like, would you continue to do that through marriage, whether it's about marriage or whether it's just about life generally? Like, it's like, okay, like, whether you have kids, like, people always ask that about, like, would you keep doing this once you have kids? All those things. It's like, I've said to you, like, I think the underlying thing of always having a space in a relationship where if there's something else you want or need, to be able to communicate that and talk about that, and then go, well, how do you get that? Is there anything I can do to help you get the things you need?
Yeah.
Or do you need to go do it? And whether that's in marriage, whether it's when you got kids, whatever, it's like, if you believe in the fundamentals of why we're doing this and why we've chosen consciously to choose this life and the way we're conducting this relationship, I don't know if I don't see that there's this, like, oh, that stops when this thing happens, or hey, you've been together this long, or when you live together. Sure, some of those things will change the circumstance and maybe make them more complex. If you've got kids, when you live together, it's like, but yes, it might happen less frequently. Yes, at some point we might drop off dating apps, or yes, it'll switch and change, as we've had that already in the time we've been together. But I think that's one of the things people are like, well, so when are you going to get serious? When is this thing where you're like, is this just like a stage you're going through, and then you go, oh, actually, no, this, like, it's not about that. It's, I think, for me, that continuing on to have, you can do what you want with your life, you're autonomous, I can do mine, and ultimately we're just choosing to then overlap in the middle of our two own separate lives.
Yeah, that's almost like on the what level of understanding things, it's non-monogamy or an open relationship, and on the how, it's however we decide to do that, and on the why level, it's because we practice maintaining autonomy and being individuals and doing the things that make ourselves happy, because we believe that we are responsible for our happiness and it doesn't rely on somebody else to make us happy or fulfill our lives. So we go and seek the things that we need, and we are quite deliberate in that, especially around things like our time and what we need. So I think what you said before was, we do practice doing things outside of our relationship, and we make sure that we have time apart, and we're not always going to be together, because it's like important to us that we don't kind of not suffocate each other, but that we make sure we fill our cup before filling each other's cup, I guess, in a way. So I think understanding the why means that the what can change. It's the why that remains consistent. So whether it's monogamy or non-monogamy, it doesn't matter. It's, are we fulfilling what we need to make ourselves happy first? What that looks like, it could be different. It's the same thing with, like, okay, let's replace the word relationship with CrossFit. I'm going to do CrossFit throughout my life because I believe it's something that I need. It makes me happy and it makes me healthy. And whether I have kids or get married or change jobs or move cities, I will continue to do CrossFit regardless of where my life circumstance takes me, because it's something that I believe I need, in the same way that the way that we practice our relationship is something that I believe I need. So how things change doesn't matter. The why and the reason that we do it, the fundamental reason is the thing that we'll continue to do, and that might morph and change and whatever as we go. I think the kids thing obviously throws in another element of complexity, and that's what people get hung up on, like, well, how would you deal with that, and like, what about the kids? And the best answer that I've had was reading someone commenting about, like, having multiple parents is not a new thing. Like, man, how many children come from a divorced household? I had two mums growing up because I had a stepmom and a mum. Like, it's not uncommon. Like, my stepbrother has got two dads. He lives with my dad and he's got his dad. Like, his stepdad is his kind of primary role, like dad role. And then his actual dad is the weekend dad kind of thing. Like, you've had multiple adult figures in your life. Like, I know so many people who go between houses and between adults and between parental figures. It's like, it's actually not that uncommon. And yes, it might be complex in terms of, like, just coordinating that shit, like, and like booking out your calendar and scheduling things, but it's actually it's something that we see in already in day-to-day life. It's just something that comes under a different label.
And I think that's that's taking that to the extreme of like where there's actually really people embedded in your life that you'd be at a point ready to introduce, and
Mm.
your kids get to know them. But fuck, like I don't remember growing up like my parents going to their friend's place, or if my dad went somewhere to visit, it's like it's not visible anyway. Like if you choose to say you'd only be still having casual partners or whatever during that, I think it's time, energy, some of that stuff that will be the major complexity. Because there's so much, like it's like you don't have to tell your kids everywhere you're going all the time. It's like they'll get to a certain age where it's like you might explain some of that, but
And you'll fuck up your kids anyway.
yeah.
Right? Like I think somebody came to us and was like, how would you tell your kids, like how would you deal with it? And I was like, fuck, good question. Like we've been in a relationship for a year. Like I really don't know. I'm sorry. But it was coming from someone whose parents were also non-monogamous, and they were like, it really fucked me and my brother up. Like the way they went about it, they did XYZ, and it was a really shitty experience for us. But I have a similar story. And I remember my dad being like, hey, I want to let you guys know that I've met someone and like I'm dating someone, and just wanted to like let you know. And I remember being so upset and so mad that he hadn't asked us first, which I don't know why. I don't know why I was like, you need to get permission from us and let us know. Like, that's what you should do. You should care about us more than you care about them. And so I just remember being really upset and really hurt. And I really held that against my stepmom initially for a long time. And like, she's a really lovely human. So it didn't take long for me to be like, oh, okay, fine. You're nice. I like you. God damn it. But it was like, I remember being traumatized and like being really mad, just so mad about that. And it's like, they were in a monogamous relationship. My parents previously had been in a monogamous relationship. He was seeing someone else. It was the same experience that you probably would have in a open relationship with parents seeing multiple people. Like, so I think you get fucked up either way. Which I'm not promoting, but like I don't
try
think
our best not to.
Yeah, I don't think that it comes down to the label or the type of relationship. It comes down to how you talk to people, why you're doing things, and how you discuss it, and yeah, maybe coming down to like the way things are talked about and in the way that you practice. Yeah, like it kind of is, right? It just comes down to like, well, how are we going to deal with this, rather than like, oh, well, non-monogamous kids get more fucked up than monogamous kids. It's like, no, that is absolutely not accurate.
Well, I think that I remember now the person that reached out to you, they said that their parents hid it completely, didn't talk about it.
Yeah, and they found out accidentally or something.
Yeah, there was, and then like on the inverse of that, there's a TED talk with a girl that talks about her parents being open. So she's talking about consensual non-monogamy.
What is that? That's the Build-A-Bear relationship TED talk, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
It's a really we should find that actually.
Yeah, we'll put it in the description.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's about this girl that does a TED talk, and yeah, her parents were non-monogamous, and she was talking about the value of it and how amazing it was and all of those things. And it's like, so you can find an example of someone whose parents, the kids got fucked up because of their non-monogamous relationship. I'll give you a hint. There's probably a few people that had monogamous parents that have got fucked up kids as well. So
are you thinking of anyone in particular?
Nope.
Yeah, there's a Justin Lee Miller podcast. He is the guy that does the Sex and Psychology podcast, and he has a podcast on kids in non-monogamous relationships. So we'll put the link up for the TED talk, and we'll put the link up for his podcast about the people being in monogamous relationships and people having kids in non-monogamous relationships. So that was the question. And I think, could you be married and continue non-monogamy? So yes. Do I believe in marriage personally? No. Do monogamous or non-monogamous people believe in marriage? Absolutely. There are a whole lot of non-monogamous people out there who are married, polyamorous people who are married and doing whatever practices in their relationship. A lot of homosexual people that are married are usually open. I'm not going to say usually, that's a big generalization, but they've been doing this stuff for way longer than heterosexual folks. So
I think it's more accepted in their community.
Yeah, way more accepted. So that's something that happens. So yeah, you can absolutely be married and still be non-monogamous. Okay, cool. Moving on to communication. We talked last podcast. It was more like last month. We've been on a bit of a break. And then it was really hard to lock down a time and coordinate two people. I think the hard part was that when we're together, I'm like, I didn't want to rob that time that we have together to be like, we have to do some work or film a podcast.
Like, we had a really crazy busy week, a bit of like
a weekend away week,
COVID panic, COVID stress, then weekend birthday, and then last week's been
we did have a shit week towards the end of lockdown.
Yeah, but now we're back.
Not COVID stress because we got COVID. We have not had COVID yet. No. I'm excited to get it and just tell the whole fucking world about how that experience is. Okay, so we talked about staying silent and convincing yourself that it's not a big deal. We talked about saying the words you always or you never. We talked about only ever giving negative feedback because we assume that the people that we love know that we love them and that we appreciate them without ever having to tell them, which is fucking false. And then we also talked about like the historical being hysterical, which was a really cool thing that you brought up.
Thing I heard on a
I just
podcast.
like the way that sounds. It's just fun to say.
Yeah.
So now we're on to the last few. So I was going to do 10. And the best part about it is I sent an email with the first 6, but I listed out the last 7, 8, 9, 10. And it's just gibberish. It's just like, example. So that was Greg meant to be filling them in. So when we're going to get to number 7, and then we're just going to be like,
That's good because that probably would have taken 3 podcasts
Yeah.
to cover. So we're already half an hour in and we haven't gotten to the questions yet.
fuck it, we're going to go Savan mode and just talk for hours. If you guys have been listening to the news with Savan on the Savan podcast, it's filmed or recorded on Monday Australia time and Sunday night in the US. That podcast is like 3 hours long. I cannot function after that podcast. I'm like my brain is dead after that. It's like 3 hours. You're just like, oh my god. Okay, so back to our podcast. Number 4, not being willing to own your part. For example, being the victim and stalling any possibility of growing or finding a new approach to things. So I think like the not being willing to own your part, when I read this with fresh eyes, the first thing that came to my mind was learning to take feedback. And that process, it's really interesting because you have to allow yourself to think about things in terms of if someone giving you feedback or telling you the story or telling you something that they're not happy with or whatever it is, I think the natural response in my experience is I'm always like, I'm going to think of all the ways that you're fucking wrong. Like, let me defend myself and tell you how I'll explain all of the stuff that you're telling me right now. And I can give you the circumstance, I can give you the reasons, and I can give you why I'm right. But you have to be able to be like, I hear that shit coming up. I'm just going to park it and go, what if they're right? Actually think through that. What if they're right? If they're right, what would I do about that? Like, if I'm the person that they're saying I am, is that the kind of person that I want to be? And can I see examples of what they're telling me in my behavior? And is that something that maybe is affecting people in ways that I don't realize? And what happens really quickly when you do that is suddenly your guard comes down and suddenly you actually feel often quite bad about it, which is you do feel bad about it when someone's giving you feedback that is possibly negative, but it's not bad about them. It's bad about yourself. So that's why you go into defense mode. Like, you feel shit and you're like, wait, no. Like, I'm not like that. I'm not doing it. And the fact of the matter maybe is that it wasn't intentional. It wasn't deliberate. So that's why we get defensive, because it feels like someone's telling us that we went out of our way to do something in a way that's affected someone else in a shitty way. So we try to defend ourselves. But when you go, okay, they're right, I did something, it upset them, or it affected them in this way, or I fucked that up, and this is what happened, this is the consequence. You're like, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to do that again. Or in some cases, you'll stand by what you did. Like, there are definitely cases where I'm like, look, I hear them and I'm going to make some changes, but I'm going to take a little bit of this and take a little bit of that. I'm going to leave that other stuff because I'm this is who I am and this is what I want to be. So it allows you to almost objectively take an assessment of like what you did, where you're at, what you are okay with and what you're not okay with. So like, that was a really big part of just coaching with seminar staff, getting feedback and being like, you always want to go back to them and be like, this is why I did that though. This is, listen to me. Like, I'll explain it. I just fucked that little bit up and like, I don't normally do that. Or like, oh, nah, like it was just this. And I just had a bad day. Or like, oh no, I was really tired. And like, oh no, I meant for it to be different. And it's like, hang on a second. If they're right, then it means that this is what happened. And it means that I need to change that next time. And it's like, it's just it's hard because it really takes you, like it says here, like not being willing to own your part. You have to fucking own your part and own all the shit parts of yourself, which is like, you don't really want to do that because you don't believe that you're a shit human or like that you do shit things. It's like, hey, like sometimes you suck at stuff and that's okay. And the sooner that you're willing to recognize that and be like, all right, fuck, maybe I do suck at that thing, but not let that threaten who you are as a person and just be like, hey, I did that thing and that's the thing out there. And it's like, it's not necessarily a personal attack. It's like, hey, let that go. Like
Mm.
we're still here. The reason they're giving you that feedback is because they want to tell you and share it with you and improve things. So the sooner that you can be like, hey, maybe they're right, I do need to change my behavior, rather than like it's not a personal, rather than thinking it's an attack on who I am as a person, and like they're saying that I'm this kind of person. It's like, no, it's a behavior thing. Can you change the behavior? So I went on a little bit of a tangent, a little bit of a winding road there, but
Yeah, and I
what have you
think-
got for me, Greg? Tell me.
I think we talked about in maybe the first episode around that sort of personal attack thing. It's like, even so, if you're the person giving that feedback or talking about that, not letting it be personal. Talk about the problem, and I think that's as soon as you start attacking someone's character in order to try and make your point, it makes things super hard and super complicated, because people are going to be even more on that defense and start attacking back, because it's like you hurt their feelings about who they are, or you start to talk about that. But it made me think about the podcast I was listening to yesterday, the Tristan Harris one. Was on Rogan. He's the guy that did the Social Dilemma. So he was talking about sort of even finding like middle ground with someone about what you agree on was one of the things you talked about, is saying, okay, what is it that we actually agree on, and then work out from there to be like, okay, what are the facts that we agree on? Like, and I think in that, it's like, you might actually land where it's like, hey, whatever the feedback was of like, hey, you did this wrong by me. We go, okay, well, like, how did we both contribute to this? And maybe even agreeing on that to start with, or like, what could I have done? Sort of both owning those things together,
that's a
because
really
then
good
it makes
point.
it a lot easier to then go, okay, look, we both agree. I could have done this a little bit better. You could have done that a little bit better. Now let's talk about the next bit, the next layer out. And I think that just sort of softens it a little bit in a way where, you've got to own up to your shit if you want someone else to own up to their shit. And it's like, there's no point just, I think in every situation, particularly if it's around communication, is saying to someone, hey, you should have done this, whatever. Maybe you can learn of how did you communicate the ask. If you ask someone to do something and they didn't do it, and instead of just going straight into like, why didn't you do this? I asked you to do it. You said you do it. Well, did you communicate it well in your ask? Did you explain it in a way that it was easy for them? Whatever the contributing factors, I think you can always maybe self-reflect a little bit to say, could I have done anything better to change the outcome, at the same time as they might have not done the right thing.
And then the conversation becomes different, right? Like if you've got a problem because somebody didn't do something that you asked them to do, it's a partner or a friend or whatever the relationship is. If you've gone and going, well, hey, why didn't you do that? I asked you to do that. That's like quite confrontational. And it's a little bit, it's directed at that person, and it kind of like highlights the fault being that person not doing the thing. But if you've gone, hey, what did I do? Did I contribute to this? Did I not ask them in the right way? The question could then be, hey, I know that I asked you to do that thing, but like you haven't done it. So is there a better way that I can like ask you, like, how do you like to be, like, what kind of support do you need? Like, I remember talking to you about that in terms of like doing housework. You were like, I fucking hate being asked. You're like, if you ask me to do housework, I will not enjoy that process. And like, I know that we're in a different place now, and I think that conversation, it looks quite different, but I think that you come from a place where somebody had been asking you to do shit a lot, or nagging you, maybe. Is that why?
My mum growing up.
Yeah, so it's like asking. So then it was like, I remember being like, okay, well, what if I need you to do something? Like, how do I do it? And you're like, if you start doing it, I will suddenly get the hint real quick. So it was almost like a, can you lead by example? And that's how I will be able to contribute.
I think
without feeling pissed off about it.
That particular thing is very much, I think, a tone thing as well. The way someone asks, or the way someone tells me to do, like, yeah, there's a tone to it.
Just the mum tone.
Yeah. And I've told you a couple of times when you've done that, I'm like, hey, the way you said that, let's not do that.
I also find that really funny, though.
I'm glad you enjoy it. What I was going to say on that is, like, that's something, like, for me, often, like with work, for me, like, I'll need, I'll debrief my whole day essentially in the way of like, I'll replay some of those conversations with people to go, wait, how did I handle that thing? Could I have done that better? What, like, if it didn't go the way that I wanted it to, or if it was good, or I'm like, I'll often go through that process with a lot of those interactions, maybe doing it too much, thinking through, like, how could I?
You're not an overthinker, are you? No, not at all.
Not at all.
Absolutely not.
Ruthlessly introspective. Sometimes
I mean, and
to
that's
my
it.
detriment.
It takes being introspective to be
Yeah.
able to be like, okay, what did I fuck up?
Yeah.
And I think that I often look back, and we can look back with rose-colored glasses at relationships and play the victim role. Like I said, it's like if you play the victim, it's very easy to put the blame in it was somebody else doing it, and I was just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's like, no, fucking bullshit. So I think I can look back at my relationship where I was with someone who cheated on me, and he was cheating on me for 6 out of the 7 months that we were together, and I'm like, man, what? Why did that happen? I thought we were in such a nice relationship, but I was the perfect girlfriend. And then it's like, you know what? No, like I can look back on that and I can find points that were difficult and shitty and not great. And we didn't communicate very well. And he definitely wasn't communicating to me. And then it was just sticky and not smooth and just, we just had moments that weren't great. And I'm like, okay, I can see how that happened. And I can see how I definitely contributed to being in the position that I ended up in. Like, and I'm not going to take all the blame for that because I think it still takes a person that's not got great values or morals or like to non-consensually be non-monogamous with someone. To cheat, right? I'm like, you still got to be an asshole to do that. So I'm like, I'll give him the credit for being the asshole. But like, the relationship was not perfect. And we had a lot of issues. And I think had they not come up at the time that they did, they would have come up later down the line, no doubt, right? Like he wasn't communicating. There was stuff missing with me as well. So it's like, as much as I would love to be like, oh, he's just a narcissistic prick and like, poor me. It's like, no, you know what? Like, it wasn't a great relationship. And it's very easy to look back and be like, no, but I was such a great girlfriend. Why would anybody ever want to cheat on me? Like, how dare they? It's like, no, like it wasn't perfect. We had a lot of ups and downs, especially because it was long distance for a while at the end. And it's just like, it was shit. Like it was shit. There were a lot of bad times. So yeah, I think if you're reflecting back on stuff, if you're giving feedback to someone, make sure that you are ready to be like, okay, hey, like I did this. You responded like that. Is this something that I can do differently? And then I think more often than not, the person that's taking the feedback is like, okay, well, I actually did this. I can do this differently.
Even I just thought about like not giving feedback as well. Because like we're talking a lot about like when you're giving feedback, not like, but I even know from some of the DMs you've got and just like talking to people, it's like complaining about like, or not some. So the scenario I thought about was like people talking to you and going, oh, my husband hasn't cooked dinner or helped me around the house for 15 years. And it's like, it's really easy to go, oh, my husband's a dick because he hasn't done all this stuff. It's like, well, what have you done in those 15 years to communicate what you need? What are you like? What's your part in that thing? Like, I think
how do you get to 15 years complaining about that?
But that's what I meant. Like that shows, hey, like, yes, like I think that's the perfect example of this.
Like they spent 15 years of enabling.
Yeah, and it's like, well, hey, if in the first year you set up this thing where you just did everything for them, if you're 5 years in, 3 years, whatever the time frame is, going, oh, well, they never do it. Go back, think, hang on, what did I do in order to create this? If you didn't speak up, if you didn't set expectations around what you wanted, what you needed from them early, hey, it's on you as well. So, you know, and so I think that's just something there where it's like people will externally complain about, oh, my partner never does this, or they always do this, whatever it is. It's like, if you're saying that to other people externally, but you're not saying it to your partner, you're just as guilty of the problem because you're just sitting back going, oh, they're shit because of this.
Some people are getting so burned right now.
That's fine.
Fuck. Okay, so what do they do? Like, is that like, well, tough shit, like you fucked it up and this is just the way things are now? Like in the case of someone who's multiple years deep and like these pretty well-defined like roles, I guess you play, right? That one person does the one thing that they always do and they fucking don't like it because the other person doesn't do it. It's like, okay, well, is it too late? How do you talk about that?
I think the sooner you own the fact of like, it's your job to communicate that as well. Like, and that's, I think once you own that and be willing to own your part in that, to go, hey, I have, and look, super hard. I'm sure it's super challenging to do.
Hey, for the last 12 years, I know that I usually do the dishes, but I actually really don't like it.
I don't think you need to
Can
bring
you
in
help
the
me?
history in that. Like, I don't think you need to say, hey, for the last 12 years, like, you haven't done this. Like,
No, not in the you haven't done that. In the I know that I've contributed by doing this thing since we've met.
no, I still don't think you need to, like,
You don't
voice that.
reckon bring it
No,
up?
I think, like, once you've owned it and you go,
Just
hey,
move
all right,
forward.
I've fucked up. I should have set expectations around what I want and need. You should be able to, if you've got communication, and you know, and
Well, no, you don't have to have communication first. I think
Well,
that's the beginning of it. Being
yeah.
like, hey, like,
I mean the
let's set
skills
an
to raise that
expectation.
with your partner.
Yeah.
Because that's a big step for a lot of people. That's the first.
I think that's
hurdle
the
involved.
beginning of
And that's
developing
what I've struggled in the
communication.
past. Is like that. How do you even start the conversation where you're like, "Hey, I need to talk to you about something." Is
That's how you
legitimate.
start it.
Yeah, no, but that's what's hard for a lot
Yeah,
of people.
yeah.
That's I've been in relationships where I've been stuck and haven't been able to do that. So
Yeah, and
that's-
so saying that is the beginning of the communication, right?
yeah, but
Okay.
I'm saying that takes a skill to even, and it's hard to even get.
But
to
how
that
do you
point.
have the skill before you've done the thing? That's what I'm saying.
Okay. I'm going to move on. You know, so you can say, "Hey, I've really been thinking about some things, and this is some stuff that I need," or I'm feeling like, "Hey, I'm feeling really overwhelmed, or I'm stressed at the moment, and it would really, you know, I want to chat about how we split up
Mm.
duties around the house, or cooking, or hey, there's some stuff like I need." I think you can bring up that and say, "Can we talk about this thing without dragging up like, hey, for the last 15 years you've been shit in your pad and help me." You know, because I think that then just causes a bit of an inflammatory thing of like, well, you know, you start throwing shit at each other. Whereas I think you should be able to, at any point, say, "Hey, this is what I need from you."
I really like the idea of talking about, and we discussed this in the last episode, where you talk about the problem not being the what is going on, but the way you're feeling. So I think sometimes coming at it from like, hey, right now I feel pissed off, I feel overwhelmed, I'm really stressed out, I get upset really easily. Some days I feel really good, some days I feel really bad. I feel like I have a really, really long to-do list. I feel sad because of the shit going on in the world. I feel I'm scared a lot. Like if you come to someone saying, "Hey, like I'm having this experience right now and I really need to create a solution and I don't know what that looks like. Can we talk about this?" And it's almost like you're asking for their help. And I think that approach as like I trust you and I know that you care about me. I think that it's quite a loving way to be like, I have a problem. This is where I'm at. And part of that will be them contributing to that problem because they're not doing things that you need, right? Because that has not been met. So I think that coming to it with like, this is how I'm feeling, this is where I'm at, I think that gives them an opportunity to feel like you're confiding in them, to feel like you're asking for advice and help, and to feel like they can contribute to the solution rather than being told what they need to do, rather than having the mum tone, right? Being like, hey, I feel shit and you need to do this because when you're not doing that, it makes me feel terrible. It's like, that's not a bad way to go about it. But I think if you can be like, I am in this place, I want to come up with a solution, but I'm really stuck with it. Do you have ideas? Can we talk about it? I just need someone to talk to about this stuff. I think when you can open up about what's actually going on under the hood, I think that gives someone insight into what you're feeling and where you're at, rather than like the problem being the fucking dishes or the problem being whatever the problem may be. It's like, hey, if it's because it's never the dishes, right?
No.
It's not those small things. Yes, they can be annoying, but they often add up and they compound because it's been all this time of doing that. And then you've got the feeling of like being stuck or feeling like you have to do it and you're always responsible for those things and you're the person that has the job of, it's like there's a lot more going on to that with that. And it's like if you've come to someone saying, I feel like I have to be the boss all the time, I feel like I have to be in control all the time, and it's really like just become too much for me, I think that gives that almost then not enables them to continue to do the problem, it enables them to be the problem solver.
Yeah, it's like Brene Brown stuff around vulnerability. It's like leading with that, like leading with vulnerability will always get a better result. And it's like, whether it's in relationship stuff, work stuff, it's like, for me, like that stuff with Brene really resonates in a work sense for me. But I think in relationship as well, like where it's like, instead of just like when you're stressed, like yelling and shouting at people saying, hey, I need this done, this is deadline, blah, blah, blah. Instead of saying, hey, like I'm really under the pressure at the moment. We've got a lot to do, whatever it is. And so I want to come together with you. And it's like you create that unity in you're solving the problem together. And it comes the same thing in a relationship. And like what you said before about, if you were to ask me to help with housework, if you would just say, hey, can you do the dishes? That I would have a reaction to that. But if you said, hey, say we had friends coming over or something like that, and you're like, hey, I feel really stressed about.
You did it yesterday. You were like, hey, can you contribute?
Yeah, Yeah, and that's what it's like, and it's like if you feel like you're under that stress, or you share that, hey, I'm feeling really stressed, and here's the thing that you can do to help me with that. That's where, for me, the way that I'm wired, I'm very much an empath, and I want to help.
Yeah. People want to
it's like,
help, right? People
yeah,
don't want to make
most
a
people want to
relationship
help.
difficult. Yes.
Yeah, and it's like, so that for me, that's my communication style, and how if someone says to me, hey, I feel really stressed and I need your help, and this is the thing that you could do in order to make me feel less stressed, I'll jump to it straight away. I'll help.
Yeah,
And it's
so
like,
if you
I
can
wouldn't
lead
have any
with that,
reaction.
then
Yeah.
I think that makes a significant difference.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah, so bring that up to your partner to say, hey, like, this is going on, whatever. Like, I just think it makes a huge difference, rather than just saying, hey, I need you to cook dinner tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It becomes about me talking
Shared-
about myself rather
shared
than me
problem.
talking about you doing shit.
Well, you create a shared problem that you're both solving together, which is
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. Number 5, avoiding conversations or stonewalling. So we did talk about staying silent in
Yeah,
episode
we kind of covered that.
6, part 1. So yeah, we probably don't need to go into this too much. I think stonewalling is important though, because stonewalling speaks more to, rather than just not talking to someone because you are not able to perhaps be the instigator of a conversation or of needing to talk about something and being like, okay, I'm going to actually take that action. I think stonewalling often can be when someone's trying to talk to you. And the reason that the example is actually from my ex hanging up on me when we were having like a really shitty conversation. We weren't having a fight, but things had been tense because I'd felt really disconnected from him because he'd just moved to Sydney. So it was like within the first week, I think. And it was just like we weren't talking to each other, we weren't seeing each other, and it was just like I think I was freaking out because I was like, I don't know what's going on. Why does this feel weird? And then I was shutting off a little bit. So I was like, I'll just leave him alone. Like, I'll just give him space. It's probably me. I'll just like back off. So then we suddenly were even more distance. And I remember talking to him, and I was on a seminar weekend. So I was fucking away working as well, which annoys me when that shit comes up. And I'm like, man, I don't need to be dealing with this right now. And I was on the phone to him on the Friday night, and he was, I think, planning to like go out with his mates, and we were kind of having this like conversation it wasn't bad. I'm not a yelly, arguey kind of confrontational person. It was like, hey, like, what's going on? This feels not great, and I don't know how to deal with this. And it was just kind of tense. And then I think it was kind of maybe getting to a point where it was like, do we keep doing this, or like, is this making us really miserable? And he just hung up on me, like kind of out of the blue, where he was like, I can't do this right now. And we were literally like kind of mid conversation, and then he hung up on me to the point where I was like, did his line go dead? What happened? Did he lose Wi-Fi? I don't get it. What's my service like? I'm like, kind of came out of nowhere. I hadn't been hung up on. I don't think I've ever been hung up on by a partner. We weren't young. Like I was 28 or 29. He was 29 or 30. I'm like, we're not in fucking high school. Like, that was a really weird thing to do. But it was someone that just didn't have the skill or the ability to just talk out hard stuff. Like, just didn't want to deal with it at all. And maybe he had a whole lot of guilt and shame and things going on because he was cheating on me and he knew it and I didn't know it at the time. So it was like, maybe he was just like, I can't face this. I just need to get off the phone. But yeah, I remember that being such a shock and being like, oh, fuck. And then he just ignored me for the entire night. And I was like, hey man, that's not very cool. So yeah, that was, and there's an example of me being like, it was a perfect relationship. How did that happen? And it's like, no, it was far
Maybe
from
not.
it. Yeah. But yeah, so I think stonewalling, like when someone does make a bid to communicate, no matter how bad it is, and people will fuck that up, right? Like people will fuck up how they reach out to you, how they make a bid to talk about something that's important to them, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Like it's something that's important to them. And I think if you shut that off, if you stonewall, which means that you just become unresponsive or you stop talking to someone, like that person that doesn't talk to you, like, it's a friend. Like I remember not talking to a friend when I was in high school. She said that I dress like a slut. And I was like, yes, I do. No, at the time I was so mad. Because I used to wear denim shorts and they were pretty short, but they weren't like, my mum let me out of the house in them. She bought them for me. Like I wasn't buying my own clothes. I was like 13.
You've come so far
I've
between then and starting this episode telling people about a paddle with
She
the
was a
word
very
slut on it.
conservative friend. Okay. I was not a slut at all. I didn't even have a body to be slutty with, you know? Like, I was just like a kid. I remember hearing that she thought that I dressed like a slut, and I was like, how dare she? How dare she? And because I was so frigid as a kid as well, like, I think I'd kissed a boy maybe at that point, maybe once or something, and I was like, oh, I'm not even a slut.
Do you remember the frigid,
least call me a slut
frigid
when I
test
am a
that people
slut.
used to do?
What?
The frigid test. Do you remember? Is that a New Zealand
The
thing?
frigid test.
Frigid
There was a
test.
test to test
Yeah.
frigidity.
Yeah.
What was it like? How far can you tolerate a hand being slid up your thigh?
Yeah. So it was basically that you started with the finger, like I think on someone's lip, and you basically went like down their body, and see like when they go, like when they stop you.
Whoa,
I remember that at
that's-
high school. I remember that like early high school, that being a thing where like
That's
people
like
would
sexual
start there
harassment.
like down their chest. And like, yeah, if you got like belly button or wet, and then it was like whatever point you're like, no, stop it. It was a thing.
Did you pass that test with flying colors?
No, I think I probably was frigid back then as well. I was shy. I was a late bloomer.
You're a late bloomer.
I didn't have my first
Look at
kiss
you all
until
bloomed
like
now.
16. 15.
Thank
15.
you.
No, 15, maybe 14, 15. Yeah. It was a slippery slope.
You're like,
And here we
wow. This is awesome.
I think I'd pass the test now.
Yeah, you would. Okay, so where were we? Stonewalling.
Yeah. I think one of the things I was going to say about
But
stonewalling.
hang on. So the point of the story was
Okay.
she called me a slut, and I stopped talking to her for like months.
Yeah.
We never even became proper good friends again. I just stopped talking to her, and that's stonewalling. You don't deal with it. You just avoid it, and you avoid it by not communicating with that person at all.
I think the thing to make sure we don't get that mixed up with is something that like being really clear with your partner if you haven't had the discussion about how they handle conflict.
Mm. What's your
Shorts are
opinion?
so provocative.
They are. Yay! We have people in the comments. Hi, Sarah.
Sorry, do you want me to hide my
Shorts are
legs?
so
I can-
provocative. Do you know what?
There we
I
go. I'll
reckon
make
the
it easier
length
for
of
you.
Greg's shorts right now are probably the length of my shorts. No, my shorts were definitely
I've
shorter
got
than
my
that.
legs crossed.
Do you know what? I was so skinny when I was a kid. I was just bones and a
Yeah.
little bit of muscle. Like I'm like, how am I a slut? Like this is not being a slut
Is this something you
because I
still need to
knew
work
what
through?
slut.
It seems like it's still a problem.
Okay, back to story.
Yeah, I think that like being really clear with your partner about how they handle conflict
Yeah.
is important because you know you could take stonewalling as someone just needing space,
Mm.
and for some people, you know, at conflict they'll need just a little bit of space to reflect. Like, I think just making sure you don't like if your partner's like, hey, I just need 10 minutes to chill out, or I just need to go for a walk, or I need half an hour, or I need
I
an
need
hour.
a day.
Yeah, to not then go, oh, you're stonewalling me, and it's like, hey, like understand they need what they need. I think it's important to say, like, you know, if you know what they need, and they say, look, generally when I handle conflict, I need just an hour to go chill out, do whatever. It's like give them what they need then. But if you're still then, you know, later that night, you're like, hey, can we talk about what happened earlier? And they're still, you know, and they're not even communicating about what they need is
Mm.
maybe the important thing. And then back, you know, if you're the partner, then setting that boundary to be like, hey, I'm not stonewalling you. I just need this. I don't think that's stonewall because you are actually talking to them about what you need at that time. It might be that you're not ready to fully talk it through because you're still processing it. But I think that's maybe just as a distinction between the two.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think having the conversation around how do you deal with conflict? How did your parents deal with conflict? Like,
Yeah.
what's an example of how your parents sort out an argument or sort out like something that they disagree on? I know that we've kind of had that conversation around like, well, this is what I normally do. And I remember you having that insight as well when I was like, oh, I don't really know like why I shut off or like I shut down. And I sort of go into like the little Kate space where I'm like, I'm just going to go and shrivel up in a corner over here for a while. Okay.
Because I'm a like want to talk about it at the time person. You're
Yeah.
a need a bit of space person.
Yeah.
And it's like once you know that, it's like, okay, like if you say, hey, I just need
But
to
I
process. like,
I always feel better when I talk about it. And
Yeah.
so I think that my automatic response is actually not reflective of what I would like to do that actually works through things to get me to a point where I actually feel good about things.
Yeah.
So the longer we've been together, the shorter that time's become. Where like if something happens, or I feel upset about something, or if I'm just tired, if it's just a bad day and I'm
Like
just
when
tired.
you fell off your bike.
Like, when I fell off my bike. It's like today's going to be
I don't
a
want to
bad
talk
day.
about it.
I want to go home. It was an awful day. I automatically am like, I just don't want the world to see me. Like, I don't want to. I'm just going to go figure this shit out on my own. And I think that you said something really insightful that I appreciated, because it actually, one, made me go, oh fuck, you pay attention, and two, like I learned something about myself. You were like, I think you do it because you've always been through that process on your own. So you're really good at doing it on your own. Like, you'll go and sort out your own feelings, and you'll make yourself feel good, or you'll get to a point where you just get over it eventually. And then you come back out into the world and you're just your normal self. And so that was my process at the time. Like, and I didn't even realize it. It was just like, I would go hide away for a little while, go feel upset, go like watch a movie on my own and eat a whole lot of chocolate or ice cream or whatever it was, maybe have a cry. And then like the next day I'll be like, oh yeah, yesterday was a great day. I'm totally fine. I don't know what you're talking about. You know, like I'd almost totally forget about it, and you wouldn't even have any idea. It was just like, I just got to a point where I'm like, okay, and I'm over it. Except with you, and there's a really great podcast on Multiamory where they talk about internal processes versus external processes. And I think it's called, Are You a Spitter or a it's something like that. It's like, are you a what is
I
that?
remember.
You remember? And there's like a name. I remember sending that to a friend, being like, you need to listen to this, because she was like, I'm so sorry I keep telling you all this stuff. And I was like, no, it's cool. Like, I realize you're a spitter.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's appropriate. Are you where you're going to find it right now? So they talk about
I'll
being
see
an
if I can-
external processor versus an internal processor. And I think I've worked my way towards being more of an internal processor just by default, because I tend to be on my own and I'll process things. You're more of an external processor, but I want to be an external processor, because whenever we do eventually talk about things, I'm like, oh, I feel so much better. And then that time that I would normally take, that's like maybe 2 days to like get over something, or 24 hours, can be reduced down to like 5 hours or 3 hours.
See, I don't know whether it's that I'm an external communicator in that way. What takes its toll on me in those scenarios is what I said before about that internal voice and being so introspective in that way, where my brain will keep wondering like if I've done something wrong, or what's
Like
going
the
on, and
unanswered questions.
like if someone's like acting a little bit weird, and it's like, hey, like, is everything
That's just
okay?
like the empath in you.
Yeah,
like,
but that's what it is. It's like it takes a lot of energy if I know someone is upset or something like that, and I don't know why, and I want to understand, because it's like, well, you know, I want to understand what's wrong, so if I can understand whether I can help resolve it, or if I had a part to play in it. So it's very much like that part. As long as I know that, and that's what I think I said to you really early, was like, hey, if you need that space, just say to me, I need some space. Everything's good with us. Like, we're cool. You know, give me something so I know, okay, everything's fine. I don't need to be stressed, because otherwise I spend that, whatever that space is, where someone's like, hey, I need a gap, just my brain going, oh, what can I do differently? We've got a question in the chat. Do you want to answer? Do you want to do the last one on this, and then come to that? How do you want to?
Does Greg give you any prompts for communicating in those circumstances?
Did I just? Is that what I?
Well, it could be about a previous part of the episode. Sarah, if you're still listening, let me know specifically what circumstances I would get a prompt for communicating that stuff.
Are you a chewer or a spitter?
A chewer or a spewer?
Or a spewer.
Still stuck on spitter.
Yeah,
I thought it was something along those lines.
Yeah.
Are you a chewer or a spewer? Episode 264 on Multiamory. We'll put that in the show notes along with the other ones. Really good
Save that.
in terms of like understanding how you like to deal with things, and if you're someone who really likes to talk it out, or if you're someone who does it kind of on your own. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Next one.
So, well, I think that was kind of in terms of like, hey, talk about the way that you deal with conflict, talk about the way that you communicate, because stonewalling isn't necessarily always just stonewalling. It can be someone that just needs to internally process.
Okay, so
Yeah.
question
So
from
when I
Sarah?
shut off, yeah. Okay, cool. So the question is, does Greg give you
Yeah.
any prompts for communicating in those circumstances when I shut off? Like if I'm just like, I'm going to go into my bubble. Yeah, I normally, well, actually, you're very good at picking up on that now. Where like,
I think it's physical.
yeah.
I remember that day you bike home when I put my hand on your leg and then
it
you're like
just-
break down. Or a couple of times I've just grabbed you and given you a hug and you're like, okay, that's what it like.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think something that I try to do now is what Greg said before, where the thing that makes him feel better and feel more secure is knowing that we're actually okay. And it's just something that I'm figuring out. So an example of that is actually Greg had a date one night and he was hanging out with a girl and he came over to my place the next day. And I remember still feeling a little bit like just a little bit uptight about it. Like I wasn't unhappy. It was just sometimes you deal with those emotions and it is kind of hard to it's just an uncomfortable emotion and you do feel insecure. And this was kind of a while ago. So it was like a little earlier on in our relationship and he came over and I just remember still feeling a bit like just a little bit on edge, like a little unsure and feeling a little upset about it. And I remember just saying like, hey, like I just needed you to know I'm just processing that right now and like we're good and I'm super happy with like where we're at and things. But I just want to make sure that you know that right now I'm like this because I'm just kind of still digesting it kind of thing. And even in the process of saying that, it made me feel kind of a bit of a release. So yeah, I think the prompts are you just know, like you pick up on it because my body language tends to be fairly obvious because I do get real quiet. I will say, hey, like we're okay. I'm just doing this. So I kind of clarify, like I'm just going through that process. Like I'm just dealing with that. I'm just figuring that out. And then you'll often offer like, do you want to talk about it? And that's when I'll say yes or no. And more often than not now, I think I say like yes, or I'll start saying something about it and then we'll kind of get into a conversation about it. And that's when I get a chance to talk. I'm trying to think of any cases where I've said like, no, I just need time. But I don't think that's happened for a while now. Like I more and more, like I said, like the time between feeling upset or uncomfortable around something has just reduced down massively because I actually enjoy talking about it as hard as it can be. I think when I was going off on my own to deal with it, it actually just prolonged the actual dealing with it. Like I don't think it was actually processing. It was distract, numb, avoid, deny, be doing something else, go watch TV, go get food, whatever. And then I would just over time be like, okay, I kind of have forgotten about it. I woke up the next day being like, it wasn't a big deal, whatever. So I think what happens is when I talk about it, I actually deal with it immediately rather than just like waiting for my memory to become less clear or like waiting for a night to feel like some kind of immediate gratification. So I think that what I was doing where I felt like I was going off and figuring it out is actually just not dealing with it. So now I actually deal with it immediately, and the sooner that I can do that, the better I tend to feel more quickly. So yeah, I think the prompt is, hey, like we're okay, but I'm just dealing with this. You'll respond with, do we need to talk? Do you need something? What can we do? And then usually we end up talking about it. So far we have, yeah.
Cool.
We have one more. Being malicious in response to someone doing wrong by you. So I have two examples of this. Greg's neighbor right now loves a banger, loves to play a late night tune. All night though. Just like she's like nocturnal or something. And just plays, and I don't even know, some kind of electronic, dubsteppy, weird, like ravey kind of music that's like pretty hard.
You can only hear the bass line.
It's hard music though. Like I can't even pick up on like, there's no songs I recognize. It's not a style of music that I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of know that. Like it's not trancey. It's not typical EDM stuff. It's not super mainstream. I mean, if it is, like maybe you just can't hear the melody or the lyrics at all. Yeah. It's all just like fucking doof. So if we wanted to get even, I would 100% play real loud music at our typical waking times, which is like you'll wake up at 5:30, I'll wake up at like 6. So like, man, we could be super malicious and just get back at her. And that would be one way to respond to someone doing that. Another example is someone tailgating you. and then you slowing down.
I do this.
You do that all the time. Or someone driving slow, so you tailgate them.
No, I don't do that.
You do, because I've asked you to fucking back off from people a few times.
Maybe I sometimes do.
Yeah. Your just perception of depth is different to mine. So I think when you get even to make yourself feel better, that's probably one of the worst ways you can communicate in a relationship, whether it's your neighbor or that person driving in front of you on the road or your partner. And I'm a big one on this. Like I think it comes from having a sibling, and I was the oldest. So I was real hung up on making sure that things were fair. And if it wasn't fair, I felt like I hadn't been done right by. I was like, this is fucking bullshit. He's 2 years younger than me. Why does he get to stay up as late as me? That's not okay. When I was his age, I had to go to bed an hour ago. This isn't fair. What the hell? Like anything. Like he got a bike. I didn't get a bike until I was 4. Like
Always the older child that's spoiled.
not spoiled. The younger child, you had no rules. The younger kid gets all the same rules as the older kid, and that used to do my fucking head in. So I'm really aware of anything that I feel like is uneven, unfair. One person gets more, one person gets less. I tally things. I tend to keep scoreboards. I really try not to anymore, but I'm aware of when I do that. So it's really easy when someone does something that I feel like is unfair or wrong or like not okay, or they've behaved in a certain way, I will often respond by behaving in a worse way. So either in the same way that they've behaved to get back at them, or I'll one up them, right? Like if they did that, then I'll do this. If they played music at night, I'll fucking play music at first thing in the morning and wake them up. Like whatever it may be. Like they didn't do the dishes, I won't do the dishes for a fucking week. Like, anything. Find something bad and I'll do it back to them to get even, to get revenge, because it's out of malicious intent. Because they did something wrong to me, rather than actually being like, hey, please stop playing music so loud late at night.
It just makes me realize why me and my sister didn't get along when we were younger.
You just realized that then?
No. Well, so, slight tangent, but a story about how much of a shitty little pain in the ass younger brother I was. We joined this like CD club when we were younger that like you get like a mail order CD. So you could, and I remember like you could choose like 2 CDs a month or whatever, or maybe 1, whatever the deal was. I was young. I was the younger brother. Sister was older. And I remember one of them, I knew there was a CD that she really wanted. And I think we had to alternate between who got to pick the next month or something like that. And I remember picking the CD she wanted because I knew that then she'd have to borrow it from me if she wanted to listen to it. And so it was Human Nature was the CD. I still remember that.
But did she do anything to you first?
No, well,
she was just an
older
older sister.
Ongoing, but like then I wonder why, like we were always at each other for the rest of our lives because it was
like I don't know why we didn't.
We
get
were
along.
both
Such a shame.
shitheads to each other, probably, no doubt. And it's like, but I think about like, okay, I did that thing. Like I probably copped it back in some other format. So anyway,
I definitely think that an underlying thing that comes with somebody's malicious response to something that they feel that had done wrong to them is the scoreboard thing. And this can go for not just bad things happening, but for good things happening. So not only can you keep score of all the times you didn't take the trash out, of all the times you didn't pay for food, of all the times you didn't do the dishes, of all the times you didn't drive, of all the times you didn't pack the kids' gear up, of all the times you didn't whatever. You can also keep score of all the good things that you did, of all the times you did do the dishes, of all the times you did clean the car, of all the times you did buy the food, whatever it may be, you can keep score of those things. A lot of the times they're not even either. So it's like it is often they've done the bad things and you can highlight all the times they wronged you, and you can only highlight all the times you doing the good things. So it's like I did XYZ and you didn't do this thing and then that thing. So it's like it's not even an even or fair comparison. As much as you feel like you're the queen of fairness, it's like no, all you're doing is comparing all the great things you did against all the worst things they did. You have to compare all the great things they did against all the great things that you did. You can't compare bad things with good things. It has to be bad and bad or good and good. So I think the scoreboard is something that can be like a maybe an underlying issue with that. That's someone that's going to be malicious in response to something going on.
I think the hard thing about relationships is like looking at that holistically, because you can go, well, you haven't done the washing for 3 months, whatever it is. And it's like, have they done are they the only one that's done the lawn for the last 3 months? Or like, it's really hard, I think, in a relationship to without like you shouldn't be keeping a story, but to make sure there's balance and equilibrium through all of these different aspects that like going out on dates, paying for dinners, whatever it is. It's like, well, that and housework. It's like, how do you, if you're trying to even put some form of maths to try and figure out what is fair to that, I think it's really hard because there's so many different aspects of what's in your relationship. So
Yeah, I think the scoreboard is not a healthy thing.
No.
And I know that I do it, and I try to be vocal about it. Like if I'm like, hey, like I keep tracking this, or like I'm aware of this. We often talk about it because we compare cooking and cleaning.
Yeah.
So something that you do regularly is you cook like all the time, and it's something that's super like you don't even notice that you're doing. It's really automatic. You tend to cook more than I do. I clean more, and often in response to the fact that you've cooked so much. So I'm like, you cooked, I'll clean. And you hate that because you're like, no, like I need to do more cleaning, and this is my mess and I should be cleaning up, and you're making me feel bad about it. So we end up having these conversations where I'm like, hey, you got to let me clean. And you're like, no, like I got to do the cleaning too. And I'm like, yeah, but you've been cooking every single meal for the past 2 weeks. Like,
we had a good conversation about that when we were away, because that's
Yeah.
I'd kind of said to you, like, I don't view cooking as like housework. Like
As
it's not
equivalent.
equivalent. It's like I enjoy the process of cooking, and it's fun to put on a podcast, put on some music, get in the kitchen, and just cook away. And it's like that for me isn't work. It's just something I enjoy doing. So it's like that's when then you're cleaning. Well, I'm like, wait, I haven't cleaned, so that's for me. That feels imbalanced in my head. But yeah, when we were away, we kind of talked about that of like, hey, like just trying to.
how did we end up working through that? What was the conversation?
I think
I think I was like, I don't know, because we've had multiple stages of that conversation. Like it's something that we never quite worked through because we're both pretty set and like, you don't consider cooking a chore. I consider both a chore, and the way that I can contribute is by doing the cleaning.
Well, I think one of the things that we've talked about with that is that we don't live together at the moment, so it's like going away on holidays or something like that. Yeah, like I was cooking more and I was doing that stuff, but yeah, I don't know. It'll probably keep going. But yeah, like I think once we live together, like I think what I said to you was like, look, if we live together, I'm not going to be able to cook dinner and breakfast every day, kind of thing. Like I will need to learn to ask for your help and learn to split that part equally as I need to learn to split and help on housework kind of stuff. Like, so I think it'll change as our life situation.
Yeah, I think part of the conversation that maybe got more productive was when it was like, hey, I need you to see how I'm perceiving this through my eyes. So consider that the way that I see cooking is the same way that you see cleaning, maybe is the way that we ended up talking about it, where it was like, look, I know that you don't think that cleaning is a thing. Cooking is like a big deal. But let's say that you were doing all the cleaning, like you'd be clearly, there'd be like an imbalance, I guess, to a degree. Not to say that we're going to ever find perfect balance, but it was like, look, if you're going to do a lot of the cleaning, then like let me contribute in some way. Yeah, I don't remember exactly how that went, but I think it did just come down to like, this is just how we contribute, and it felt good for me to be able to do that for you in the same way that it feels good for you to be able to do a cleaning or do cooking or whatever it is for me. So I think it felt, once it got beyond the point of you feeling like I had to do it, it's something, I think maybe it became something that you were more willing to be like, okay.
Yeah. Cool.
I think we got through it all. I think we got through the main points. There's the gibberish points next that you never filled in. Do you have any other things that you think are really bad with communication?
No, I think we covered it.
I mean, it's the basics, like yelling,
Yeah, no, we talked
swearing,
about it in the first one.
like calling someone a name. But I think that falls maybe under the you always or you never thing.
No, I think we covered it.
Okay, so I promised a sex tip. And I was reminded of this recently because I was listening to someone else saying it, and I was like, oh, that's right. So this is going to be a blowjob technique, which is not going to apply to you, I guess. Sorry. This applies to all the ladies and other people that give blowjobs out there. Everybody. So real good way to practice deep throat technique is to use like maybe a toothbrush or like a spoon. I mean, if you've got a fucking dildo, which are not hard to get, like just order a dildo online and practice putting that object very deep in your throat and getting used to not gagging. So like gagging is a reflex that you can control. And so if you practice that with an object and just stay calm and relaxed and just kind of like not think, oh fuck, I'm gonna gag. Using that can help you practice deep throat.
Have you tried with the spoon?
I've not tried with anything because I
Oh.
don't need to.
All
All right.
right. Thanks, everyone.
Peace out.